And the meeting is being held via Microsoft Teams and is also being streamed live. The committee for this hearing comprises Councillor Malcolm Spalding, Councillor Pat Mason and myself. Councillors, can you please introduce yourselves? Councillor Spalding.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Malcolm Spalding. I am the Councillor for Earls Court Ward. I have no interest in this case to declare.
Thank you.
Councillor Pat Mason, a councillor for Goulburn Ward. I have no interest to declare in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. We're joined remotely by Paul Phelan and Laura McGowan from the Council's licensing team. Our legal officer is Lindsay Le-Masurier. Also with us is our committee officer, Anne Wright, who will be monitoring all of our connections and will help with any technical issues that may arise. She is supported by Yasmin Yama and Hannah Koskela. Before we start the hearing for this case, just a few ground rules, please. Keep your microphones on mute until you are invited to speak, and please make sure mobile phones are on silent. Do keep your cameras on when speaking if you wish, unless we run into connection problems. Please note that the Microsoft Teams chat function is not monitored, so please do not use it. In addition, this is a public meeting and the chat would not be seen in the live stream. Everyone should have received the procedure for this meeting regarding the use of cameras and how to connect back in if you lose connection. Thank you. The case before us today is to vary a licence for Cinquecento at 233 Portobello Road, London, W11 1LT. Now for declarations of interest. Councillor Spalding and Councillor Mason have already declared that they have no interest in this case, and neither do I. The quorum for this committee is 2, as there is always the possibility that I may lose connection temporarily during the broadcast. I'm nominating Councillor Spalding to be appointed as the substitute chair. Members, please confirm whether this nomination is seconded. Councillor Mason.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you very much. I confirm that Councillor Spalding has been appointed substitute chair. Thank you, colleagues. For clarity, I will outline the procedure of the meeting, which, as already mentioned, has been circulated with the papers and are online. First, the licensing officer, Mr. Phelan, will give a brief outline of the application. Please could you confirm your attendance?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Then I will ask the applicant's legal advisor, Thomas Bushnell, to present his submission. He will have up to a maximum of 10 minutes to do so. He's joined by his client, Emmanuel Tagliarina, who may be able to assist members should they have any questions. Please could you both confirm your attendance?
Yes, good morning, Madam.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam.
Thank you. Once the applicant's case has been presented, questions will be asked by members of the committee, followed by questions by the responsible authority. And after that, the responsible authority, Mr. Mahaffey, will present his objection. He will have up to a maximum of 10 minutes to do so. Please could you confirm your attendance? Mr. Mahaffey.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. After that, questions will again be asked by members of the committee, and questions may be asked by the applicant of the responsible authority. I understand that the resident objector is not attending this morning. After that, we will ask the legal officer, Ms. Le-Masurier, to deal with any questions she may have, for example, regarding any conditions. Please could you confirm your attendance?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. There will be no summing up and the meeting will end. I would like to remind everyone that the committee has read the papers, so there is no need to repeat their content, but please do draw our attention to specific points and pages, and Anne Wright will move the document on the screen for us. So let's get going. If you want to turn off your cameras, please do. Mr. Phelan, please can you outline the case for us?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Today's application has been made by Cinquecento Portobello Road Limited for the variation of a premises licence at basement and ground floor 233 Portobello Road, W11 1LT. The application before you today seeks to add the first floor to the ambit of the premises licence. This includes changes to the existing floor layout to integrate the floors, the addition of off sales for the same hours as currently permitted for on sales, and to update the basement and ground floor plans. The applicant has, as part of their variation, proposed several steps to promote the licensing objectives. A list of these proposed steps can be found on pages 2 and 3 of today's report. Today's application has attracted a representation from Mr. Keith Mahaffey, a Area Senior Officer for Environmental Health, Noise and Nuisance. A summary of Mr. Mahaffey's representation can be found on pages 3 and 4 of today's papers, with a full copy attached to Appendix D, pages 36 to 37. One additional representation has been received. A summary of this can be found on pages 4 and 5, with a full copy attached to Appendix E on pages 43 to 44. Apologies. Council records indicate that the premises received no complaints over the preceding 24 months, and I can also confirm that no temporary event notices were received within the same time frame. That concludes the summary of this application. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Now for the applicant's case. Mr. Bushnell, please can you present your submission? If you want to turn your camera on, you're welcome to do so. You have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Madam, may I split my representations into 3 parts? I first want to tell you a bit about this premises. Then I want to make the positive case for why you can, and I would suggest should, grant this application. Then finally, I want to answer directly, I hope, the understandable concerns of the resident who's objected. Now, I want to start by saying right away what this premises is and what it isn't. And I want to say what this premises will be if you grant this application, and what it won't be. This premises is a traditional pizzeria. It is a restaurant that is focused on making from scratch the best possible and most authentic Neapolitan pizzas, with most of the ingredients sourced directly from Italy. Like a traditional pizzeria in Italy, its primary customers are families. It strives to be a friendly and welcoming restaurant serving its local community. It is as simple as that. And being Italian, inevitably, the premises also sells high quality alcohol with a focus on Italian wine to go with the food. What this premises is not is a bar. It is not a pub. It is not a nightclub. It is a restaurant. And madam, if you grant the application today in full, none of what I have just said will change. It will still be a restaurant, and it will still not be a bar, a pub, or a nightclub. All it will be is a bit larger and hopefully more successful, and able to give those local residents who order takeaway pizzas the opportunity to add a bottle of something nice to their order. That is it. Madam, it may be that is all very obvious to the committee, but I do really want to stress it because it explains the reasons for this application, the conditions we propose, and I hope actually goes quite a long way to answering the concerns. To give you the background very briefly, Mr. Tagliaria, the founder, has been in the restaurant trade for about a dozen years. In December 2019, he and another founder set up the first branch of Cinquecento in Chelsea. This restaurant opened in autumn last year, and a further branch opened shortly after in Notting Hill Gate. Turning then to the application, in some ways it has 3 parts. Parts 1 and 2, as you've heard, are simply to extend the restaurant up to the first floor and to the terrace. At the moment, food and drinks are prepared in the kitchen in the basement and customers eat on the ground floor. The extension is sought because the restaurant is doing well, and let's face it, what is more Italian than al fresco dining if the weather is nice? Extending the license to the first floor would also allow for what some restaurants would call private dining on special occasions, but primarily, madam, it would simply be used to extend the operation of the normal restaurant. And crucially, you will have seen, we suggest that the same conditions as on the ground floor license would apply to the first floor and the terrace. So in particular, Madam, those on pages 11 to 12 of your bundle. That includes condition 17, the sale and supply of alcohol on the premises shall be to customers seated at tables by waiter and waitress service. And can I just pause at this point and say we agree with all the amendments to the existing conditions as were suggested by your legal advisor in a document circulated yesterday. So in short, if you grant this application, the first floor will look and sound exactly as the ground floor does. Dealing then with the terrace in particular, again, this will just be a part of the restaurant. It isn't big, it's got a space for about 12 to 15 covers. Condition 17, again, table service will apply. There will be no music playing, and the premises has agreed to all the perfectly reasonable conditions suggested by Mr. Mahaffey. It will close the terrace at 9 p.m. every day with the doors to it shut, and there will be notices outside to remind customers of where they are. And the use of the terrace in that way at all would be temporary. So for 2 years in the first instance to see how we get on. And again, subject to Mr. Mahaffey's views, we're happy with the amendments to those proposed conditions suggested by your legal advisor yesterday. For completeness, can I just, I'm sure you will have spotted on the basement plan, Madam, you may have seen the word bar next to the toilets. That is where drinks are prepared to go to the restaurant. Mr. Tagliaria tells me there are 2 stalls there. They have not to date been used by any customers. He wonders whether customers waiting for a table would be allowed to sit there whilst waiting and have a drink in the future, but I leave that up to you. That's not an integral part of the application. And ditto on the first floor, I can see somebody's helpfully showing us the first floor. Again, that's bar counter, but that is not to be used as a bar per se. That is for serving and preparing drinks. So that's all those bits of the plan mean. Then the final part of the application is to allow off sales, subject to the condition as amended by your legal advisor, that they are in sealed containers only and supplied with and ancillary to a takeaway meal. Again, the restaurant has no desire and no intention to turn into an off-license or supermarket, and this condition makes that abundantly clear. Turning then to the objections, you will have seen that the premises engaged with the noise and nuisance team and agreed all the conditions suggested. Otherwise, there is just one objection from a resident and none from the police. Pausing there, Madam, you might think in a pretty residential area that in itself is quite telling. But that is not to say that for one representation received deserves any less of an answer. And so it seemed to me there were essentially two areas of concern raised. One, off sales leading to street drinking and the problems associated with that after 10 p.m. And two, noise nuisance, the creation, it is said, of a bar and party terrace. As to the first, Madam, this premises does not want street drinking either. But that isn't going to be caused by this very narrow off-sales permission we seek, because we only ask for off-sales in sealed containers and ancillary to a takeaway meal. And if that wasn't enough, the pricing and style of alcohol sold by this restaurant will deter any street drinkers that we're all concerned about. The alcohol will be sold at restaurant prices. And Madam, one only has to look at Appendix J in your bundle to see that there are far more likely sources of cheap alcohol just down the road. I'm thinking particularly of the two supermarkets. So we would very respectfully suggest that there is no need to limit the off sales to 10 p.m. because these off sales will not cause any street drinking issue. As to the noise nuisance, again, I hope I've already begun to answer that, but can I make 5 very brief points? One, We assure you, and we'd assure the resident if she were here, that there is no intention to create a bar or a party terrace. The conditions proposed prohibit that anyway. There is simply a desire to expand the restaurant and have a small amount of alfresco dining. 2, agreeing to conditions proposed by the noise and nuisance team does not demonstrate an intention to create a nuisance. Quite the reverse. It is a genuine attempt to work with the noise and nuisance team to prevent it. 3, while I'm on the topic, can I just underline one point made in the pre-application advice? This premises sought professional help regarding sound escape prior to meeting Mr. Mahaffey. The architect suggested inserting further sound insulation into the walls, and a technician checked its effectiveness. That is how seriously, madam, this premises takes its responsibilities. 4, as for patrons leaving, this has not been a problem at the premises so far. You will have seen we've agreed a detailed condition on the creation of a dispersal plan, and there will be a natural staggering of leaving. As you'll remember, the first floor would close at 10:30 p.m. and the ground floor license currently goes later than that. So inevitably, you would have a staggered leaving if the ground floor was staying open later than the first floor. And finally, madam, this is not an application to extend any hours. And indeed, you will have realised by now that the proposed closure time for the terrace and the first floor, so 9 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. respectively, are well short of midnight, the time highlighted in your policy as being of particular concern. And just for your note, madam, that's the paragraphs 8.9 to 8.13 in the policy. Madam, can I conclude by saying this? Your policy rightly recognises the contribution of licensed premises to the borough. It says you will not impose restrictions on proposed activities except where appropriate and proportionate, and that you will support the hospitality industry during its recovery from the pandemic. I hope you will agree that granting these modest variations would fulfil that policy perfectly, because this is a family-friendly restaurant which has not caused problems so far and has willingly agreed to the conditions sensibly suggested in order to promote the licensing objectives. Madam, those are my representations. As you've heard, I'm joined by the founder and DPS, Emanuela Tagliarina, who would be very happy to help me answer any questions you and your colleagues may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Spalding, do you have any questions?
Yes, Chairman, if I may, 2 questions. Can I refer the applicant to the plans on page 34 and 35? The first question is, on page 34, on the ground floor plan, in the bottom right-hand corner is shown a service window. I'm just very interested to hear the applicant's use of the service window, because I understand there's a planning condition that prevents the use of any kind of courier delivery service. So can you explain why that service window is there?
Of course, sir. Basically, this window was there before we already took the premises, and so we just thought to leave it there, not to change the frontage of the shop or to involve any planning to actually change the door itself. So for that reason, we just left it there. To be honest, at the moment, we just use it as, let's say, we open when it's a bit too hot. As you can imagine, it's just in front of the pizza oven. So the actual area is very, very hot. And we don't actually sell anything through that window because the customer that comes to collect the takeaway usually go inside the restaurant and is being served through a member of the staff directly. So at the moment we use it just as a window just to ventilate the premises.
So there's definitely no use of any courier motorbike delivery services or bicycles or anything like that?
With the allowance that we had because of the COVID period, we've been able to do some deliveries, but still mostly were done when the actual shop was completely closed for customer. So the actual driver, they just come into the restaurant to pick up the order and they just left. We know that there is that we can still do this until 2022, but still anyway, we always concentrate only on sitting down customer. As it was something, when we took the premises, we knew that was a planning permission in place that we couldn't do any delivery, and we were happy with that in the first place.
Yes, sir. May I just jump in there? Just I think Mr. Tagliare's answered rightly, but just to underline, you are absolutely right. At the moment, in normal circumstances, the planning permission for this premises prohibits couriers for takeaways, but the government at the same, or the Parliament, in fact, at the same time as relaxing off sales for the hospitality trade in the height of COVID, relaxed the planning laws on deliveries for obvious reasons, so that restaurants that were shut, etc., or struggling could do that. So yes, this restaurant has been making use of that relaxation under COVID, but as you've heard, we're not making any particular application in regard to that today. When the deregulation ends, currently I think it's supposed to be in September 22, then the premises will have to decide if it wants to explore with your planning officers that in the future. And can I add one more point? I suppose it is to the restaurant's credit that you've heard that it has been making use of that relaxation, that exemption as it's allowed to at the moment, but it's not received any complaints about it. So you might think, sir, that assists you too. I hope that helps.
Good, thank you. The second brief question. I've added up all the seats and I've allowed 12 on the terrace. So that gives me a total of 68 covers. I just wondered if that was something you had in mind as a kind of maximum capacity of number of seated potential drinkers as about 68.
Yeah, it's about 65, something like this. But obviously, mostly is only, we won't be serving any alcohol on the counters. It will be just on the tables with food. So we want to keep the same trading that we have now, as is a restaurant, and we've been quite popular in the area from the actual people that live around and also people who visit. So we just needed, to be honest, more seats. That's the only reason why we are going ahead with this. Mostly is because you know, we have high demand and it's bad that we cannot serve all the people because we don't have enough space, basically.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Chairman, for my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just touch on the deliveries before I forget, on the question that Councillor Spalding asked on deliveries. I mean, I'm sure you know this, but that the market, the portable market, is a functioning market. It's functioning 7 days a week, and it's also partly pedestrianised as well. I assume that you will, in terms of the hatch and the courier issue that you mentioned, you will, or you have considered the clash between motorbike or deliveries and the market itself. The market traders can get very combative if they are obstructed in any way on their trading, and they have got legally paid stalls after all. So I assume that someone will that you will factor this in, otherwise it will become a problem for the business. It could become a business clash between two sets of businesses. I'll continue on if and you can answer everything at the end, or do you want to go now?
So I'll forget. The problem is I'm
All right,
writing notes furiously. Well, I'll let Mr. Tagliarina answer as well, obviously. But you hit the nail on the head in terms of sort of businesses, working together. The understanding of the premises that I got from Mr. Tagliarina is this is a premises that wants to work with the local community. It's already got good relationships with residents, with local customers. And so, as you say, sir, it is in its interests, because it's lucky to be on Portobello Road, this very famous Market Road, to work with the Market Road. And so you've heard the history of that serving hatch in answer to Councillor Spalding's question. You've heard there aren't particularly great ambitions for it at the moment, but I hope Mr. Tagliarina is going to jump in a moment and say he completely agrees, and that it's in everybody's interests to work together. And ditto with the courier deliveries. That's why I made the point that at the moment, the premises rightly and lawfully uses the exemption that Parliament has given it, but you can tell that this is a premises that will work with responsible authorities. So if that exemption ends in September 2022, and the premises wants to consider deliveries, if there hasn't been a clash with market traders, etc., you can be confident, sir, that this is the sort of premises with the sort of licensing solicitors who will reach out to your planning officers and use all their local knowledge and all their local advice and decide. But that really isn't what we're applying for today. That really isn't what this application is for. It is in some ways a bit of a side issue.
Indeed.
Because really all I'm going to ask you to decide on takeaways is this very narrow point about off sales ancillary to meals. I hope that helps. I hope Mr. Tagliarina's agreeing and not wishing you could kick me under the table.
I realise it's a small part of it's not really part of the main application. I would just suggest that the law is one thing, but tangling with Portobello market traders is quite another thing. And I've been around a long time and I've seen what that leads to. But I was glad to hear that of course, the premises want to work with the local community, and that it's not going to be a bar, a pub, or a club, but a restaurant, Thomas, as you said. My question always is, if when these things are said at licensing hearings, why objectors come forward and, as this one has, and said that they think you're a bar, that you're going to be disgorging noisy people onto the pavement late at night, and so on. And which, of course, I know you know this, but the law, of course, limits the number of people that councils and licensing departments notify regarding these licenses, probably just adjacent people to the premises, which of course is why it's important, if businesses want to have a good relationship with the local community, that you actually reach out to resident associations. And I assume that you have done this. Have you done this through this pre-application process? Not the pre-application process itself, but in the run-up to the application, did you contact local councillors, residents associations? Who did you contact that you think meant that you didn't have many objections?
So can I give you the honest answer to that? A limited number of people were contacted. There's a local resident who lives right next door, who I understand the premises spoke to and had no concerns. He's on one side. On the other side, the tenants have just moved out, but the premises spoke to the landlord there, who I think is the landlord or the owner of a number of these premises, including the premises itself. Beyond that, and I did discuss with this premises very experienced licensing solicitor, there wasn't additional contact. I think the advice that licensing solicitors are giving their clients about contact has slightly changed during COVID, because there is less of a desire to arrange what used to be the sort of the diligent approach of sort of meetings in premises, etc. So I will accept straight away there has not been the level of contact that you will have seen prior to COVID in other cases. But as you say, the application has been properly and lawfully advertised. It's made in an application. It's made in an application and in a borough, if I may, with, if I can put it neutrally, switched on local residents who know what's going on, and switched on local councillors are very good in monitoring these things and know what's going on. And it was clearly advertised well enough that the resident in question felt able to speak up. So I would counsel against assuming that any lack of representations, or the small number of representations, is through a want of, is because there would have been more if more people had been spoken to. That obviously doesn't logically follow. It may just be that this premises is doing a good job, and there isn't a cause for concern. And obviously that is supported by the fact you have no representation from the police, who obviously are aware and are obliged to speak up if they're not happy, and only what I hope I don't misrepresent it, a limited and helpful and constructive representation from noise and nuisance, rather than a wholesale stop, you mustn't grant this. So please don't assume that there would be hundreds of residents objecting had there been greater consultation. And can I say, actually, I have two more minor points about that. One, Mr. Mahaffey suggested, and we have no issue with it, of course, making the use of the terrace, which in reality is probably what local residents could be most concerned about, temporary, so 2 years, and then we see where we are. So that is a very sensible suggestion, if I may. And point two, your legal advisor in the document circulated yesterday asked whether you wanted to consider a condition regarding resident meetings. And I've spoken to Mr. Tagliarina this morning, and he has no problem with that if you think that would be necessary and helpful.
Thank you. Finally, Chair, I know you're going to agree a dispersal policy plan with the council. That would have been nice to see here, right enough. I almost forgot the question I was going to ask. Yes, I've forgotten the question I was going to ask. It was about dispersal. Oh yes, I assume that plan will say whether or not you, because you said it's going to be for local people, whether or not you're going to be in any way a destination premises. I mean, it is a market after all. And will the destination plan suggest that it's only going to rely on the customer local people, or is there going to be, is it going to be destination premises? Italian community is quite a large community spread over a large area. And if that's the case, I assume any destination plan will deal with how they get here and leave. Vehicles, will it be by public transport, etc. I presume that will come within any dispersal plan. How people move inwards and outwards, by what mode of transport, etc.
Can I let Mr. Tagliarina answer the point about the intended customer base and destination? Then I'll answer the point on the policy, the wording of the policy itself. Would that be all right?
Yes, I'm sure that's okay.
If he's not on mute.
Yeah, of course. So basically, as I was saying, Tom, before, the actual 2 floors will close at different times. So the actual leaving of people will be monitored by a member of our staff. We will always say to actual customer to leave quietly, because we also do, for example, this on our other premises that they are in 1 Kale Street. So it's a kind of like built up area. And there are a lot of residents that obviously don't want to get disturbed by people leaving. And for that reason, we, especially in busy evenings, we always have somebody at the door that makes sure that the people who already exit the premises don't make too many noise, or that they don't stand in front of the premises. And at the same time, as we were saying before, the fact that the 2 floors close at different times, I think is going to allow us to let the customer live in more smaller groups than all at once. And usually also the type of customers that we have are more families and not like, let's say, too much youngsters. So even when they leave, they're always like not too noisy, let's say. And we never had a problem with any of the neighbor or even in the street on the both sides until today, to be honest.
Okay.
Can I just ask, because I think Councillor Mason also wanted to know, Mr. Tagliarina, do you, assuming it's difficult at the moment, I realise, because the premises is smaller and it's COVID, but in the medium to longer term, are you hoping people will travel from outside of the local area to come to your restaurant, or do you think it will all be, or 99% be, local residents? What do you think is more, or what do you hope will happen?
The pizzerias usually are mostly 60% is residential people who just live actually in 1 mile radius area all around. We do work a lot also with all the local businesses, even the stool people and the market people. But I think that in the future, probably we will get some customer from outside. But as we have many shops in Kensington, people will be able, if they want to visit the brand, to spread, let's say, in the 3 locations rather than just come to Portobello or to a different one, let's say.
And just finally, on the point about the dispersal policy, Councillor Mason, it's a very fair point. If people are going to travel in, the dispersal policy needs to reflect that. So may I suggest, if you do grant the application, but obviously the condition is imposed, and that in your reasons, I'd be grateful if you could highlight that. I will highlight it to my instructing solicitor. And as you will have seen on the proposed condition, it requires that the premises licence holder incorporate any recommendations of the licensing authority, police and environmental health into the plan. So we can all agree now and remember that it needs to cover exactly the point you make about travel.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Mr. Tagliani. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Bushnell, I'd like to raise just 1 or 2 points, some of which have been partly covered by your responses to my colleagues. The first one is a bit technical. On page 2 of the papers, which outlines the current variation application, number point 1, the first floor rear terrace shall be kept clear of all customers between 2100 hours and 10 the following day. And point 3 says the first floor shall be kept clear of all customers between 22:30 and 8:30 hours the following day. Now, I'm slightly confused that on the following page, page 3, under 8, it says the doors leading onto the first floor rear terrace shall be kept closed from 2100 until 8:30 the following day. And that has also been repeated in 2 other places in the papers, on page 30 and page 41. I just find it confusing. Is the intention that the first floor rear terrace shall be kept clear of all customers between 21 hours and 10 the following day, but that staff perhaps may get in before 10 o'clock, between 8:30 and 10 o'clock, so that the doors don't have to be kept closed the whole time?
Madam, that's a very good question, and I must confess, not a point I had spotted. Clearly, yes, there will be. Madam, I may have to defer to Mr. Tagliarina as to whether he requires any access to the terrace between 8:30 in the morning and 10 a.m. in the morning. I doubt he will need much access to it. But if I'm honest, I'd focus more on keeping it quiet in the evening. Mr. Tagliarina, could you? Mr. Mahaffey has raised.
Of course.
He may have.
No, basically, we won't need at all the use of the terrace in early hours, as.
Sorry, there's a strange noise.
Oh, I don't know what that means. I don't know if Mr. Tagliarina stopped talking at the same time, so I don't know if he's having technical problems. I'll just send him a quick message, if I may, ma'am.
Okay. In the meantime, Mr. Mahaffey, did you want to come in on this point?
Yes, madam. The reason we said 8:30 in the morning is basically for the terrace to be set up and cleaned, etc. There may be a case when, you know, on a warm day where they may want to ventilate the premises, and clearly having the windows closed up until 10 o'clock may be unreasonable. We consider that after 8:30 in the morning, the potential public nuisance on residents would not be significant. So we don't have a particular issue with the doors being open at 8:30 in the morning.
Okay, so it's keep the customers out for the whole period, but allow a bit of laxity for the staff.
Yes.
Apart from that, fine. Thank you. That answers that.
Thank you very much.
My next question has to do with the premises response to local people. Mr. Bush, you've said that the premises have talked to several of the local people and that you have no objection to having resident meetings. We're not necessarily going to make this into a condition if we were to grant the application, but would it be reasonable to ask that there would be a meeting with local residents associations and local councillors, perhaps every 6 months, to make sure that everybody's happy with what is going on?
Yeah, Madam, I've just had a message from Mr. Tagliarina just to update you. It said he was accidentally logged out. He's trying to reconnect. Ideally, I'd quite like him to hear my answer, just so I don't misrepresent him, although it is a topic I discussed with him on the phone this morning. I wonder if he's back in the room.
Can you check, Miss Wright? Is he back?
Yes, he's not back in the room. I will have to let him through the lobby when he reconnects.
Okay, when he reconnects, we can continue.
Thank you, Madam. I'm sorry, it's always the way, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, there was one other question, which perhaps he is the person to answer. Although he's been asked about the numbers at any one time and has responded with the perfectly reasonable point that the different floors will be disgorging customers at different times of the night. But is it possible to say how many as a maximum the premises would expect people to be leaving? In other words, how many, is there a crush point, and how many people you would expect to be leaving at that time?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I may be able to have an attempt at that. And I think Mr. Tagliarina thought the maximum capacity number of covers. Oh, he tells me he's in the waiting room now. Sorry, Matt, I've just had a message. I don't know if he could.
He hasn't come into the waiting room, Thomas. So I assume it might connect with us shortly, but no, he's not in the waiting room. You could advise him if you'd like to connect by telephone. Obviously, that number is also given on our email.
Yes, I will say that.
Well, while we're waiting for that to be sorted out, could I ask Mr. Mahaffey if he has any questions of the applicant?
Thank you very much, Madam. I just have one question. When there's one issue that I wanted to discuss with them was the cleaning of the first floor, the structural cleaning of the first floor. There will be movement of tables and chairs. The concern that I would have would be the potential for vibration going across late in the evening into neighbouring property. Would the applicant be happy to have a condition, additional condition attached to their application or their license to basically say that no structural cleaning shall take place on the first floor between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. on the first floor?
Are you able to answer that, Mr. Bushnell?
I can predict the answer, but I haven't specifically. It wasn't something raised before.
Yes.
So I will want to check. But
Emanuele
Is
pretty
now
confident.
joining.
Given
It was mentioned at the pre-application,
Oh.
but it wasn't formally put on the list of conditions, and it's
Fine.
something which I've realised is not part of the application.
that's absolutely fine, Ben. It won't be a surprise. Somebody's joined on a mobile phone number, which
Yes.
Ah.
Sorry, I lost you.
No, it's all right. Mr. Tagliarino, I think I'm looking at my notes. There are 4 questions
Yes.
that have been asked. Shall I just run through them and say what I think the answers are? Because I've started answering them in your absence, and you can jump in if I'm wrong, or you think you can improve the answers. Question 1 was why it is that the doors to the terrace are effectively allowed to be reopened at 8:30 in the morning, but no customers until 10 a.m. Mr. Mahaffey actually spared my blushes there. He pointed out that is to allow you staff to set up and clean the terrace between 8:30 and 10 a.m, but obviously no customers to be there, and to ventilate the premises if you need. So I assume you agree with that approach.
Yes.
Yes, good. The next question was engagement with local people. I said you had spoken to the immediate neighbour on one side, the tenant on the other side had left, but you'd spoken to the landlord. The chair asked, would it be reasonable to ask that you would have meetings or offer meetings with local residents, perhaps once or twice a year? My answer to that was going to be that yes, you would be perfectly willing to do that if the committee felt that would be helpful, because you want to have a good relationship with your local residents. The question for the committee will just be, I suppose, whether they require it as a condition, whether they consider it meets the legal test of necessity as for a condition, and whether it should be once a year or twice a year, given the lack of problems experienced so far. But is that right? Would you be happy to offer those meetings if the committee?
Of course. Even 3 times a year, if that would be helpful. We really don't mind. We are happy to work with the community. We already do so. We just want to be there and just be part of it.
If I may clarify, I specifically asked about involving residents' associations and local councils, not just people who live nearby.
Yes, well, Mr. Tagliarino, just to explain that, so that you would need to be given or to obtain the details of the local councillors, that's easily done, and any local residents associations. And then when you organised any meetings with local residents, you would have to ensure that those people were invited too. I assume that's not an issue at all.
No, of course, not an issue.
The next question was numbers of people leaving at one time, and the point being, at the moment, the licence would allow for a staggered leaving, with the first floor being allowed to close or being required to close earlier than the ground floor is required to close. Madam, I suppose capacity numbers are usually something I've always been told to avoid having on licenses because they're sort of health and safety issues. So I'd make that point gently. But I think the question for Mr. Tagliarino, was it possible to say how many people as a maximum the premises could expect to leave at one time? And I suppose the answer, in theory, if the whole restaurant cleared at once, which seems very unlikely, but if it did, would that be 65-ish covers? Or no, I suppose that includes the terrace, so it would be 65 minus 12 to 15.
Yes, but also the upstairs will be closed 1 hour before. So by closing the upstairs 1 hour before, half of these 60 people will actually leave 1 hour, let's say 40 minutes before the rest. So the people downstairs, then they will be If they stay until the closure, there will be another 30 coming out on another set of hours. So you still won't be all at the same time.
Thank you. I think that concludes that particular part of the proceedings.
Oh,
so, Mr. Mahaffy, sorry.
Sorry, Madam, I was just going to say we need to, I don't think we'd answered Mr. Mahaffy's question about whether the premises would agree to a condition that there would be no structural cleaning on the first floor between 11 p.m. and 8:30 a.m. And Mr. Tagliarino, just to explain, Mr. Mahaffy, I think, said it was raised during the pre-application meeting, but he was worried if the first floor was being cleaned after 11 p.m, that might involve dragging tables and chairs, which would be noisy. So would it be all right to agree to a condition that that couldn't take place between 11 p.m. and 8:30 a.m?
Yes, of course. I mean, we won't really actually clean in the evening. What we will do will just be remove the, let's say, if there are any drops of food, just to avoid any type of pest or anything like that. We don't want to go in around there. And then the day after, the cleaner will come around 10 o'clock, and then will be the time when we will clean the premises and prepare it for the opening at 12.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Madam, to cut across you, but I just wanted Mr. Mahaffy's question to be answered.
Quite right. Thank you. I think we have reached the point where I can ask Mr. Mahaffy to present his case.
Madam Chairman, I don't think I need to say anything further. I think everything's been clarified in the documentation and also in the meeting this morning. The only issue that I had was the to do with the cleaning of the first floor. So I think, Madam, we can move on without me saying anything further. Thank you.
So just to clarify, that means you are no longer an objector.
I'm holding my objection. Yes, Madam.
Thank you.
I'm not making. I don't need to say anything further.
Okay. In that case, we don't need to ask the committee whether they have any questions, and presumably the applicant doesn't need to either.
No, thank you, Madam.
No, thank you.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to ask our legal officer if she has anything to add.
Thank you, Chair. I think I was just going to ask about where smoking was going to take place.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
So, if you could perhaps advise where your clients will be smoking, will it be outside the premises or will it be likely to be on the first floor terrace?
The smoking area usually is done always outside, because even I think in the terrace, as it's an eating place, we won't allow smoking during consuming food. So probably we actually won't even let the customer smoke cigarettes in the terrace. So we will just keep on doing like the way they do now. As there are mostly small groups of people, let's say they stand up from the table and they just go outside to smoke. And then every evening we have our kitchen porter that anyway looks after the street if there are any drops or anything. And if there are larger groups, we also supply ashtray or anything like that.
Okay. So if you're saying that obviously the terrace is for eating and there won't be smoking on the terrace while people are eating, I'm just obviously we'll come to the conditions session in a minute, but would you be willing to accept a condition no smoking at all on the terrace?
Yes, of course. I mean,
okay.
We are really not making the terrace for that type of use. Mostly it's just for entirely for eating. Obviously, I can see that maybe sometimes a member of the staff will smoke a cigarette out there when maybe the premises are not operating, so when there are no customers, but it's not something that we are planning for the use of it to be a smoking area. Also because it's really near the window, and as it's inside, there will be other people eating. We don't want the fumes to come inside.
Okay, so no smoking on the terrace during opening hours. when customers are basically on the premises. Okay. What else was I going to ask? I think you mentioned that there will be no music on the terrace. I know that music is deregulated and incidental music is deregulated until 11 p.m. I'm just mooting just out loud at the moment. Would you be willing to have a condition saying no music on the terrace?
We wasn't planning to have music on the terrace because we know that it's a really residential area, and on the other hand, we know that for the next 2 years, basically, we will test this terrace, and the way is going to be if the people around will like it or not. So for that reason, we wasn't really planning to add any type of music outside because really we don't want to disturb anyone around.
Okay, so that's food for the that's for the councillors to think. And I think you've mentioned during the course of the hearing that there will be no vertical drinking at the establishment. All the alcohol will be served to people seated at tables. But I think you mentioned the possibility of people, the downstairs bar, possibly people being wait there and have drinks. I think that's, but you've confirmed there's no vertical drinking at the establishment.
Yes, madam.
No, not at all.
Madam, that was my fault. I spotted that this morning. Yes, apparently there's just 2 stools by the bar downstairs by the toilets. So they've not been used so far for customers. And Mr. Tagliarino asked if customers came in and were waiting for a table, would they be permitted to sit at those 2 stalls and start a drink and some olives, etc. But we leave that entirely up to the committee. If the committee is not happy with that, then that's absolutely fine, and you can make that clear. But yes, condition 17 at the moment is just says waiter service at tables. So yeah, entirely a matter for the committee.
Thank you. And just to confirm, the bar on the first floor is not for customers. It is just basically for service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there are in the first floor especially there is no stools, also because it's a passageway, it's a passage area. So that in that area particularly the waiter will be picking up the trays that the bartender prepares to be brought to the table.
Okay, that's
so it's just like a bar that we need to serve the tables.
Fine. Okay, and one final question before we go on to the draft conditions. Obviously, depending on what the councillor's view is. I think you were going to provide 2 plans for the first floor. One was going to be a temporary plan, which included the roof terrace, and the other was going to be the permanent fallback plan, which excluded the terrace. Is Mr. Bushnell still there? Was he dropped out?
Sorry, yes, and Madam, I must confess, I wasn't aware that was the plan, no pun intended. I'm sorry, I assumed, and I'm reliant on Mr. O'Malin, who I'll blame for this if necessary. He wouldn't mind. No, the plan we submitted for the application is obviously covers the application in full. And so the red line, I'm just scrolling down my copy of the bundle. Yes, so the copy, it's page 35, covers, the red line covers the terrace as well.
So that will be the temporary plan for the, but obviously yes. We need for the purposes of the fallback position, if you don't get a further permission or if you decide not to go for a further renewal, we'd obviously, as of the 5th of August, we'd need the fallback position plan, which would exclude the terrace as well to be attached to this licence. So would it be possible to provide that plan, please?
Yes. So do you require that the 5th of August as in today or in 2 years' time?
I'd like the plan to attach to the licence today, depending obviously what the councillors are minded to grant. So there'll be 2 plans. One's for up to the 4th of August, which is the temporary plan, which includes the terrace. And one is from the 5th of August 2023, which would be the fallback permanent plan, which excludes the roof terrace. So if that could be provided after the hearing or as soon as.
Yes, I will speak to Mr. O'Malin as soon as the hearing's over. Thank
Lovely. You. Right, so Chair, are we happy to go on to the conditions session? I think.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So if we could bring thank you very much. So I think you've said you've already agreed the conditions, but I'd just like to just quickly whiz through them. Obviously, existing condition 7, we just want to update to the latest version. So it's very similar to the existing one, but you're happy for us to update it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Existing condition 10, I think you've reoffered that in the form of, I think I put it down as condition 8 on my draft condition. So your existing condition 10 would be replaced by condition 8 further down. Is that correct?
Exactly. Condition 8 further down is a beefed up version of condition 10, if I can put it like that.
And sorry, going back to point 3, existing condition 13, I just tried to update it in line with the current wording of Challenge 25. I've liaised with the police and they are still happy to use EU ID, so I've kept that in for now. Are you happy with that wording?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so number 4, this is like the alternative conditions. So obviously you've got the temporary condition, which is A, which basically allows use of the roof terrace for a temporary period up to August 2020, 4th of August 2023, and to make sure it's kept clear between 9 p.m. and 10 the following day. Are you happy with A?
Yes, thank you.
And then obviously B would kick in from the 5th of August 2023, which basically says no staff or customers shall be permitted on the first floor rear terrace for licensable and non-licensable activities at any time. And I might remove that bit about, in both A and B, about smoking, because I think you've said that you're not going to smoke. What's your view?
Yes, I suppose that bit on smoking could go.
So for both A and B, so remove the smoking exception.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll leave that up to the councillors to decide, but there's that option. 5 was incorporated into 4, so we don't. That's not relevant.
Yes.
Number 6, the first floor internal area shall be kept clear of all customers between 10:30 p.m. and 8:30 the following day. I've put the times in brackets, obviously for the councillors to make the final decision, but you're happy with it as it's worded now?
Yeah, that's a helpful clarification, I think, because yes, the terrace is on the first floor as well, I suppose. So yes, that makes sense.
And then number 7, the off sales shall be in sealed containers only and ancillary to a takeaway meal. Are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you. Again, I think that's just a clarification of the wording, isn't it? But yes, it's the same point I've made.
Great, we've covered 8. Number 9 was the dispersal and external management plan. Maybe I might just incorporate into it the wording to include travel arrangements, just as one of the options. I think you said that would be covered by the plan. Are you happy with that?
Yes, we will, as the condition requires, the premises will take the advice and work with the responsible authorities. So if it needs to include travel plans, then it should. Arguably, we don't need to say it, but it's a matter for the committee. I don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Number 10. I've got no. You obviously you've offered that condition, and I'm happy with that. So no change there. Number 11. I think there was the discussion about whether it's 8:30 a.m. or 10 a.m. when the doors are reopened the following day. And obviously, Mr. Mahaffey's happy with 8:30, but obviously it's down to the councillors at the end of the day.
Yes,
I'm happy with that. Number 12 is just our standard consumption condition. And as you've made clear, and I've also made clear to the councillors, all these conditions will apply to all the floors. So are you happy with number 12?
Yes, in effect, it's sort of almost, I think it's already basically the effect of the license, because the sale of alcohol is required to cease at, I think, midnight on most nights, and the terminal hours is half an hour later. So yes, that's absolutely fine. Brilliant.
Okay. And number 13, no staff or customers. Well, I think I put that smoking on the roof terrace between 9 and 10 the following day, but I might change that to at any time. Well, it's up to the councillors, obviously. But you've said there'll be no smoking on the roof terrace. Is that okay?
That's fine, yes.
Thank you. 14, I think your client's already agreed to meetings twice a year and to notify local residents association and ward councillors, I believe, as well.
Yes, I'm just looking at that. The proposed meeting should be done. Yes. So we don't. Yes, I'm not sure we need. And residents of XXX, the committee would need to consider the geography as to whether that's required.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, if the committee were minded to consider residents of XXX, I mean, what would your view be? A radius or the immediate neighbours, or?
I imagine immediate neighbours would be easiest, as long as the local residents association. I'm afraid I don't know the scope of the local residents associations in the area, but I suppose you would want somebody to be there to represent people backing onto the terrace.
And behind, okay, yeah, thank you. 15, I've just added a delivery condition because I noticed that was missing from the existing licence, but you're happy with that?
That's fine, yes.
16 and 17 are just about staff training. They're just our standard conditions. Are you happy for us to add them to the entire licence?
Yes, if they're your standard conditions, then there's no problem with that.
Thank you. And then there was the 3 that were discussed during the course of the hearing. So no structural cleaning on the first floor between 11 p.m. and 8:30 a.m. Are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm just making a note of it, if I may. No structural cleaning on the first floor between 11 p.m. and 8:30. Yes, that's absolutely fine.
I think we've already discussed no smoking on the terrace during opening hours. I think I'll incorporate that into condition 13, which we discussed just now, because I think you said staff. Well, it's up to the committee to decide either at any time or during opening hours. I think you just said staff might want to smoke there out of opening hours. And you've said that you were happy with there to be no music on the terrace either. That's for the council to consider. And obviously to provide the alternative plan as well at some point. So that's something not a condition.
Yes, I'm just. I'd ask that not to be a condition, just to.
So,
in
point
case.
to note. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Licensing officers, do you have anything to add?
Nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Governance officers.
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have reached the end of the meeting. We now have all the information we need, so we will retire to make our decision in private session. We will not announce the decision today. Instead, the hearing on this application will be closed and the live broadcast will end. A summary of the decision will be sent to parties within 5 working days of today's hearing, and a full decision will follow as soon as possible thereafter. Thank you all for attending. The hearing is now closed.
Thank you. Emanuele
is now exiting.